I would like to give the floor to the three people that has been appointed as the rapporteurs in the group. So for group one, I'm going to give the floor to my colleague Enrique Nieto. Enrique, please, key points.
Okay, I'm gonna try to share
Yeah.
our Miro, and first I want to thank actually everyone in the group. They have been very active in populating this whiteboard. We are gonna take into account every post-it. So this is just a very brief summary of four main points or clusters that I could identify from our discussion around renovation and of houses. The first issue is funding. We have seen challenges around accessing funding, high cost, people not having the knowledge on how to apply for them. There is an issue of energy poverty, so lack of resources to access. So funding needs to improve for this sort of project. In terms of ideas, there are many, starting from a proposal to have a pilot funding coming from the EU to have demonstration of projects to show what it's feasible, to learn from that. To the point as well to run campaigns for awareness raising. Sometimes people do not know all the possibilities that are available there. There has to be solutions to lower the interest rates to access loans for this type of project. This, in a sense, as well, is related with another important point, which is demography. Particularly when we talk about the rural society that is quite old, going to a bank to ask for a credit to be repaid for a renovation of your house, it is not being easy. And as well, related to that, probably funding could be linked as well to the use of some biomaterials, eco-materials, so that at the same time that we renovate houses, we also do the green transition. As well, another important point as well that we need as well data at EU level, so to conduct research at EU level of what is the situation of access to funding in rural areas to do renovation of housing, or probably can be also related to other aspects around funding in housing, which could be as well probably buying houses in rural areas. Well, the issue of demography, when we deal about that, we know we have an elder population in rural areas that creates challenges. Some solutions is to as well build some senior villages. It has been identified by some of the participants that the seniors sometimes live in very big houses or even in farms, too big for them. But they have no other choice around available. So perhaps by building these senior villages with co-shared facilities might make that their initial place becomes available together with renovation, can go back in the market and support young people. And that's an important point. The other one is about local capacities. Without local capacities, it is very difficult to activate projects for renovating houses. We talk about local champions, people leading on that topic. We have seen example of local action groups leading on housing and providing solutions, training professionals, sharing good practices. That came quite a lot, even from across countries. Networking came as an important one. So this is all around raising awareness and building capacities to take advantage of all the possibilities. And the last one is about the legislative barriers. Sometimes there are problems to renovate certain houses in terms of regulation, in terms of planning, and this needs to be co-created and adapted so that we respond to the needs and problems in rural areas. There is sometimes excess of technical requirements. There is also an issue with some regulations that prevent you from using local resources and bio-based materials, which does not contribute to developing the bioeconomy in the area. So this needs to be better addressed in rural areas.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Enrique. Let's see what the other groups have to say. There are similar barriers, constraints. Quickly, I would like to move to my colleague Urszula, who was in the group about how to improve the attractiveness and availability in rural areas for the housing through community platforms. So, Urszula, how has been the conversation? What can you tell us? As I know it's not an easy exercise, but let's try.
Yes, so we had a very, very rich discussion in my group. I wasn't as good as Enrique at drawing nice frames, but I at least I try to show you. Oh, sorry. What am I doing? So some of the key topics we did a lot of discussion about trust, because our topic, which was on attractiveness, was very much how to improve the trust between the person who would be renting a house, for example, or somebody who would be the tenant. So the improvement of trust, we had a number of solutions to all linked mainly with the role of the public sector in being the kind of mediator between the tenants and the owners. We had a big discussion about different funding incentives, funding solutions, about ways of tax and other reliefs which can really help people to and the public sector as well to resolve to make sure that there are no abandoned houses or houses that are not being used. Actually, we had the fact of there being abandoned houses. We had a big discussion, which is not yet here, which is all about the inheritance law and the long procedures where people cannot resolve the issue of somebody who died a long time ago, but the ownership issues are not yet resolved. So there's empty housing, which would be otherwise available to attract people, but it's not being made available, and also the high cost of restoration of old buildings, which we found a number of solutions from different countries. The ideas of co-housing, like we had the presentation in plenary from Friedrich, and also we had some examples from Denmark, and generally the potential of cooperatives and promoting cooperatives and having special solutions for cooperatives was mentioned as one important aspect. And of course, there is this thing of information, that the fact that we need banks, information banks, or some place where you have information about spaces which are available, which can be rented. Then we also had some points about newcomers, the need to welcome them and the need to offer them specific support. And we had some exchange about tourism, because we had also Rural Tool with us, and the solution of this dilemma of potential competition between tourism and housing, and ways to address that. I was particularly happy to hear from one of the participants that basically there exists a lot of interesting ideas, and that the point of this event is actually to start exchanging and to continue exchanging, and perhaps to see what can be applied from one country to another, because there are already quite a lot of solutions. It's just a question of knowing where they are and how they can be adapted to another context. So I want to thank all my group for being very active.
Thank you, Urszula. Yes, I can see there was quite some dynamism there. Some challenges are transversal, I believe, across the three groups, or they are more specific to the topic. You mentioned trust. You mentioned that co-housing can be some of those solutions to those challenges identified. So then let's move to the third group, which was actually dealing with this topic, community-led housing solution in rural areas. Pascale, can you tell us a bit?
Thank you, Patricia, and thank you to the participants of this third group. The first key point, which was, I would say, addressed by the participants was about cultural aspects, which was about creating communities, collaboration, cooperation, and also with all these difficulties that you have to put people who are not used to work together, like, for instance, between private public stakeholders, but also between urban and rural, let's say, stakeholders. So it was the key point which led to the other aspects. After that, as you have already heard from the other groups and from this morning, all the financial and legal barriers are also key aspects. So access to land, access to finance, and also to try to find some, I would say, some affordable prices for either to buy or to repair. So this was the second point. The third, I would say, cluster of ideas was about the demographic issues. We have already mentioned that in the other group. So and one of the answer is to create intergenerational housing, but also to find new models of housing, as it has been mentioned, like the tiny houses and other I would say new models of houses. And the two last point was about, let's say, social housing. So it's to try to find it's already part of the cultural aspects, but to try to find new approach of building, of living together. So the community-led initiatives, which was the purpose of this group. We have talked about co-housing, housing cooperatives, community land trust, and also to support as a solution to support that, it's to try to develop repair services also offered to locals. One of the participants has also mentioned, I would say, an idea about SME-friendly rural environment. So to try to bring the private sector, but in a more innovative way. And the last point, which has been mentioned as well in the presentations this morning, it's about the issue of second housing tensions, about the prices, so that the local people cannot access as they should have to the local housing. I'm finishing here, Patricia.
Thank you, Pascale. Indeed, there was also a wealth of examples shared in this group, and we have the pleasure to have a specialist from the World Habitat presenting concretely these models, and we will be putting on the webpage of the event and circulated all these resources so that everybody can look at it in more detail. And thank you, everybody, for having taken the time to join us in the mirror, add your ideas and comments. We gladly appreciate the enthusiasms and collaborative atmosphere around the webinar. To conclude with the wrap-up, we have given quite a bit of challenging task to somebody today. And for that, I would like to welcome Dr. Stefan Kordel, if I can see you in the screen. Stefan here you are, from the Friedrich-Alexander-Universität in Germany. You've kindly agreed to be our key listener throughout the whole morning, and also this is connected with a recent study that you did on housing for the aspect of the crisis. We're going to share the link to your study in a moment in the chat. But Stefan, first of all, good morning, good afternoon already. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your effort. What are your key takeaways from today?
Yeah, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to reflect on what we've heard this morning from my role as a researcher, as a human geographer, and thus from a discipline which has always combined social aspects with the built environment and ecological aspects, but also interested in how housing, for instance, interacts with public space. And as a member of the board of the Working Group on Rural Geography in the German Association of Geography, I would also like to highlight peculiarities in rural areas that we identified this morning and add some key issues from our research. What we've learned from the input on rural energy efficiency in the beginning this morning about structures of rural housing, we have larger and less compact buildings, mostly owner-occupied dwellings. It does not only impact the energy question, but also results in a specific supply of rural housing that might exclude some groups, for instance, single households or renters per se. And besides the structures, we have specific aspirations and practices that characterize rural housing. The owner-occupied dwelling is addressed as some kind of idealized model of good living and as a residential aspiration of many. And one colleague once termed this the materialization of an imagined rurality. In our own work on migration to rural areas, I would like to add this a little bit, focusing on refugees, but also on working migrants in rural hospitality sector or healthcare. Housing has always been a big issue. The topic welcoming culture was already mentioned. And it was interesting to see that newcomers who became actors on rural housing markets unravel the kind of structural challenges that may affect also other groups. There is an increasing demand by people in precarious financial situations. For instance, expected in rural areas where structural changes and transformations are taking place, speaking about the coal regions in Germany, but also beyond, but also with regard to aging. Second, it is difficult again to mobilize, and that we saw that in this morning, to mobilize vacancies and make investments. The challenges when it comes to inheritances was recently brought up by Urszula a couple of minutes ago. And third, it made clear that also rural housing has a transient character. People in rural areas were, and often are, still not used to people coming and going. But people do not stay forever in rural areas. And as persuasive measures, landlords and other stakeholders should be sensitized for these patterns. What we learned also in this webinar, the question of affordable and as well as sustainable housing in rural settings is urgent. An increasing demand for housing as well as for a specific supply indicate that there is a rural housing crisis. And I argued this in a recent article jointly with my colleague Matthias Naumann. And for us, three emblematic issues characterize this rural housing crisis. First, the financialization of the rural housing supply. So external actors come into play. Second, the increasing residential mobility of rural residents. And third, selective gentrification processes in some rural communities. So several questions have to be raised. Who is able to live in which rural areas? Who takes advantage of the current housing development and whose perspectives are marginalized? How can we achieve justice in rural housing? And it was nice to see that the European Affordable Housing Plan is addressing some of the emblematic issues. Actions addressing financializations are taken by the analysis of housing speculation impact, but also when it comes to investments in affordable and sustainable housing. Residential mobilities, not only for humanitarian reasons, but also for seasonal employment in agriculture, tourism, result in a huge demand for short-term housing, for instance, and understanding the systemic issues, but simultaneously widening the lens, for instance, in terms of private accommodation, subletting of rooms where empty nester families live, should be strengthened, in my view. And the rural housing crisis, as we finally argued in our article, is characterized also by specific spatialities. There is a regional and local differentiations of the demand and supply for housing. We learned that rural areas are heterogeneous. Regions with many vacancies coexist with regions with a high share of second homes, for instance, or tourist accommodations aggravating the demand. And as always the case, the solution will not be a one-size-fits-all. A toolbox is necessary, in my view, to enable stakeholders to act locally. However, the scale of administrative territories for housing policy and the spaces of everyday housing practices varies. Housing cannot be fully understood without acknowledging commuting patterns, for instance, to big cities or to the workplace. And this leads me to the last point. the intersectionalities, which has also been addressed partly by some of the speakers. First, there is an overlapping of different crises of housing, other societal issues such as social cohesion or energy transition and industrial transformations. Second, we observe an uneven vulnerability of different social groups to the rural housing crisis and an increasing marginalization and stigmatization. And in order to implement measures that are locally accepted, differentiated, and new paths have to be taken. And we learned about so many innovative practices today. Those practices, in my view, are most promising when we take established cultural practices of housing and living in rural areas as a starting point and understand rural life worlds properly. And finally, I recognize that some of the initiatives are also working on changing narratives of rural areas. Terms like Summer of Pioneers were mentioned and were used rather than lagging and left behind regions. So thank you very much. These were my comments, and thank you very much for attending.
Thank you very much, Stefan, and concluded
Young man, how are you?
in the narrative.
No, he's on.
Yes, we are now moving. It's almost 1 p.m. We are about to wrap up, but we are going to ask you once again for your collaboration. I'm putting again back in the chat. This will just take 1 minute, I hope. But we want to keep hearing from you, to keep shaping our events agenda, whatever it is possible, around what you are telling us. For that, just it's a very, very short. I'll share the screen. A very, very short survey with 4 questions, and then after that, you will be able to elaborate more if you wish. But just to understand how you found the event in terms of how it has enabled you to exchange from others. One is the strongly disagree, and the fourth is the highest. If you have found it, that you had the possibility, it has helped you to discover projects, practices that has been inspiring and that you didn't know about it. And around organization during the webinar, the whole agenda, moderation, facilitation, and also prior to it, the communication that we have been doing during the whole process of organizing this. I'm not going to take tons of time sharing the screen with this because we need to wrap up, but the link remained available. If you scan the QR code or if you go to the link in the chat during the next minutes, my colleagues also do the first wrap up. So please do not hesitate here for the points, but equally or even more important, ideas, things that you thought were missing or that perhaps could be tackled in a different way or in the future. Please, we want to hear from you. So take a minute or two to do that. And you can continue while I'll give the floor to my colleague Pascale van Doren to say very briefly what's next. Pascale.
Yes. Thank you, Patricia. Just to tell you that, as it has been asked in the chat, that all the presentations will be shared after this meeting, including all the, I would say, the resources that you have put in the chat. So we will try to share it either in the highlights report that you are also going to share or on the website or both. So you will be able to access to all the key elements that you have put in the chat. We are also going to share the participant list to encourage networking, the video recordings of the plenary sessions, and as I said, the report. Just to tell you about the next events that the Rural Pact Support Office will organize this year. So we'll have the second Rural Pact conference, which has still to be confirmed in terms of date. So we will inform you quickly. And we are also going to organize 2 policy labs. The first one will be on waterproofing. The date has also to be confirmed, and the other one will be about the next funding tools for rural communities, which will be also around the next MFF in a way. The next webinar, which is confirmed now on the 7th of May on tourism and cultural heritage and regeneration. And the last one of this year will be around innovation. So it has still to be, I would say, more defined, but it will be about this subject. Just to tell you that now we are about 1,400 members in the community, and we invite you to join. No, it's not here. Okay, we invite you to become a member for those who are not members of the community. So for the moment, we are about 50% of the participants of today do not get information via the newsletter and other channels. And also you are 60% of participants are not yet in the Pact community platform. So we invite you to become member, and also as Blanc has mentioned this morning in her presentation, so do not hesitate also to provide commitments either as individual or organization. Thank you, Patricia.
Thank you, Pascale. Yes, more ways to connect and to be in touch. And the last, last words go to Haude Blanc, Director General of Agriculture and Rural Development, one person that has really made this event possible. So, Haude, last words go for you.
Thanks a lot. Thank you, Patricia, and congratulations for this webinar. It was great. So I would like to thank the Rural Pact Support Office for the organization. It was really a great event. And I would also like to thank all the speakers for your inspiring initiatives and projects. So it's really great to see that on the ground, a lot is going on, a lot of activity. So indeed, as Stefan mentioned, like to change the narrative, saying a lot of things are going on in our rural areas. And I would also like to thank all of you for attending this webinar today. I hope it would support you to take other initiatives and to really have active role for housing in our rural areas. Do not hesitate, as Pascale said, to really join us, the Rural Pact community, and to continue working on for rural areas. Thanks a lot, and bon appétit, and have a nice afternoon.